Okay, Jason, today I've been giving you some flight lessons.
Right.
And you've seen me take the plane off, fly it around the patch, and land it again.
Many times.
And you've sat over there and not had to do too much except pay attention.
Right. I think I've learned a few things.
Okay, now this is going to be the first time that you start the plane, take off, fly around the patch once, and land.
Okay.
Are you ready to try this?
I'm ready.
Okay, reach over now, adjust your mixture, and then go ahead and turn the plane over, get it started.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. Now just go ahead and taxi on out to 29 left over here at the Fresno Air. Just 29 left. Taxi
Okay.
on out where it says 29 left.
29 left. Got it.
Okay, now just taxi right over into position. I've already cleared with the tower. There's nobody here today, so we don't have to use the radio. I want you to go down the center line with both feet on the rudders.
Yep.
Keep it on the center line, then gently pull back on the yoke as you increase power.
Got it.
And when you lift off, then pull the yoke a little further back and go ahead and climb out. Okay, Jason, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. Just keep it on the center line.
Hey, this is fun.
Yeah, just pay attention to what you're doing, Jason.
Yeah.
Keep it on the center line.
Got it.
Okay, you're doing fine now. Now just pull back on the yoke. Pull back. A little bit more.
Am I doing all right?
You're doing fine. Just keep your eye on a little bit more. That's it. You're doing fine. Now just turn left like I've showed you many times.
Okay,
Little
yep.
left rudder there.
Got it.
Keep the ball centered.
Got it.
A little bit more.
All right.
Come on around now. You're
Okay.
gonna come back in the downwind now.
All right.
Come back. Okay, get ready now. We're gonna go into a landing. They're coming in. Line up on the center line again.
Got it.
Okay, now just pull back on the yoke. Keep the rudder centered.
All right.
Not too much. Keep your nose level.
Oh my goodness.
Work these rudder pedals.
Oh.
Now you're coming in on. You see the center line,
I
right?
see it.
Okay, line up on it. Keep going now. Just hold it back a little bit, back until you set down. Back. All right, taxi on out now. Oh my God, Jason. Jason.
What's that? Ah!
Jason, you didn't see the tower?
I didn't see it.
Jason, forget flying. Start the show.
You can run, but you can't hide from the radio detective. Jerry Pearce, private investigator, president of the Pearce Corporation, and lifetime member of the law enforcement community, is the radio detective, catching bad guys on the run.
Welcome to the show tonight. I'm Jerry Pearce, and if you want to be part of tonight's show, it's squad room night here, which means we open up the lines for anything that's on your mind. I'm going to throw out a few things to you tonight, but it's generally like you're sitting around the squad room, just talking. Guys in the squad room, the old squad rooms, they never talked about crime. The officers in there, they talked about sports and women. That's what they talked about. They could care less about their cases. Anyway, there's a story I was going to get to the callers in a moment. Finish this story Jason talked me into talking about. My partner and I were in the beach city one night, and we were rolling along there, and we'd made a few arrests, and our job was to go out and, we were narcotics detectives, and that was our job, and we're in a plain unit, undercover car, as they call them, and we're rolling around there, and we come up, and there's two long-haired pukes standing on the corner, backpacks and all that stuff, and they're coming up, going north, probably to Big Sur, and we stood back and looked at them a little bit down the block, and finally, we just knew they were holding. That means they probably had narcotics on them. And so we drove over there, and I rolled the window down, and we were kind of dirtied up a little bit ourselves. And we called that one guy over to the window of the car and said, "Hey, man, hey, far out, man, what is it?" I said, "You want to buy this, man?" He looked at it and he said, "What is that?" And I showed it to him. "Oh, hey, far out, man." And I said, "Well, my voice wasn't quite like this in those days. I talked a little bit of that stuff too. But I said to him basically, if you got some weed, I'll trade you this badge for some weed, He says, "Oh, yeah, man." He reaches in the backpack, and what was in the backpack was all, lids of weed. He probably had 1,500 of them between the two backpacks stuffed down in there. That's an ounce of weed. He pulls out one of those and gives it to me, and I give him the badge. So I tossed the weed in the back. I looked at my partner, old Norm. I kind of smiled, and I turned around, and I said, "Hey, you really like that badge?" And he said, "Oh, man, I love this badge." I said, "Well, look at it." And he looked at it, and I said, "Now arrest yourself, you stupid ass, I said, you're under arrest for sales of narcotics, and that's the little story about the selling the badge to that hippie. Okay, let's go to Steve in Livermore, California. Steve, welcome to the show, sir.
Yes, hi, Jerry.
How are you?
Fine. I enjoyed your show with Commander Donaldson on the other night. That was great.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
I'll have him back on. He's got some new stuff. I just talked to him, in fact, yesterday again, and there's now some new stuff breaking on that. So we'll give him some time to work that up, and then maybe in a month or so I'll ask him to come on and bring us up to speed.
Yeah, that was a great interview. I hope to listen to your next show.
Yeah, I'll try to make a promo. Jason, I'll get the information out to you when he's going to be on.
Great. Say, I wanted to know, do you ever hear about that? You ever hear about Clinton's golf foursome?
No, I haven't, Steve.
It's a little kind of lighthearted here, but when you play golf, you play with four people. It's called the golf foursome.
Right.
All right. As part of his foursome, you have O.J. Simpson, who's a slicer. You got Monica Lewinsky, who's a hooker. You got Teddy Kennedy. He's got a hard time getting over water. And you got Clinton. He don't know which hole to go to next.
You're bad, Steve.
Well,
hey,
you said this is open forum. So.
Yeah, it's open. We almost got two open there, but that's all right. We love it. How's everything in Livermore?
Pretty quiet. It's kind of a growing city. It's growing too fast. I mean, it's nice once you're in Livermore, but to get in and out of Livermore, the traffic's so bad. It's unbelievable.
One time I was flying my plane back. We'd been up to Mendocino County Airport near Elk, California.
Yeah.
And we went over and stayed in a bed and breakfast joint on the cliff there. And
yeah.
So I had a little Piper Archer, and I'm flying back. And so on the way back to Fresno, we'd been flying quite a while. We decided to stop at Livermore Airport, have a little cafe there.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a cup of coffee, and just kick back. And so I'm pulling in, and I come down through, making a downwind, really, an approach in there. And finally the tower said, aircraft to such and such, identify yourself. Yeah. And I thought I'd already talked to him, but apparently I was talking to approach control over at Oakland, and they hadn't passed me off.
Oh, gee.
And I thought they did, see? So I said, well, I'm 4317 Mike. I'm a Piper Archer / uniform. And he said, what are your intentions? And I'm coming into the airport now, and the tower says, "What are your intentions?"
You're on your approach.
Yeah. Well, I'm going into a downwind, not on the final yet.
Oh.
But I'm right there over the airport, and I'm getting ready to make final. Yeah. And he said, "What are your intentions?" And I thought, well, that's stupid. I'm going to land. I said, I want to land. He said, well, you might not want to do that. We're in the middle of an air show here at Livermore. And so I had to get out of there in a hurry before I got in trouble with them.
Oh, boy.
But I almost bought the farm there on that air show. They had these guys doing all these tricks, and here comes old Pearce lumping in, and he's a little Archer there. Anyway, that's what I remember.
That was probably in July sometime.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Hey, Steve, thanks, buddy.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. Appreciate the show.
Appreciate you calling in with a story about the foursome. That's checking in about Clinton's foursome. Let's go to Lonnie in Tuolumne County, California. Lonnie, welcome to the show, sir.
Good evening, Jerry.
How are you, sir?
Yeah, I enjoy your stories and stuff, and I've talked to a few game wardens over the years, and I thought maybe you might get a game warden or two on the air.
Well, we'd love to have a fish cop on here. I mean, I have a friend that's trying to become one, a young man, and I give him a hard time about that. But yeah, I'd love to get a fish and game warden aboard. If you know somebody that is up for that, have them give me a call or have them give Jason a call. And I think a lot of people don't understand what goes into that nowadays. And I call them fish cops, but that's what all cops, they got names for each other. But fish and game wardens they've got an interesting job, and sometimes it can be a dangerous job.
Yeah, they face armed people every day of their while they're on duty, and
right.
I've talked to a few who could tell you some stories that curl your hair about pet deer,
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I know. Well, listen, do you know any fish and game guys that want to come on the show?
I know some. I don't know. They're up here in Tuolumne County, and there's a couple of retired ones I might could try and get a hold of.
Yeah, tell them to give me a call or give Jason a call, and we love to have policemen on to talk about law enforcement, and the public would like to know. I mean, a lot of the public doesn't really know. They think they know what law enforcement is, but there's different aspects, and most of what they see is our local city police officers or the deputies, but they don't really see what some of the other law enforcement guys are up to. And so, have them give me a call. I'd love to have them on as a guest, and they don't have to come here. We'll do it over the phone.
Yeah, well, you got your main office right there in Fresno. You might call.
Yeah, I'll get me out. Jason, let's do that. We'll call over and see if we can get some of those.
And one other thing, Jerry.
You bet.
I'm able to listen to you a little more often now that you're on 860.
Oh yeah.
And
well, that's good. We lost a lot of 940 listeners, but we picked up a lot of 860 listeners in certain areas, and we're happy to have them.
I kind of had to give up on you on 940 because every time you start getting good, I lose you.
Yeah.
So
860's coming in Tuolumne pretty good, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it comes in gangbusters up here.
Well, perfect. I mean that's really good. Tuolumne's a pretty county.
Yeah.
We got a lot going on there.
I lived up here 30 plus years, and right between Don Pedro and Maloney.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a neat area right in there.
Yeah.
How's the fishing been?
A little on the slow side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this weather's got them all messed up.
Yeah, it's been a weird year. So
Yeah,
no
it sure
rain
has.
and warm weather, and they don't know what to do really.
Well, listen, Lonnie, Jason's yelling at me to take a break. I got to do that to pay the bills. I sure appreciate the call, my friend.
Encourage your listeners to join the CRPA too.
All right. How can they do that, Lonnie?
Oh well, I don't have my magazine here, and
Okay.
Just California Rifle and Pistol Association, Sacramento.
All right. We'll make mention of it. We appreciate the call, my friend.
Thank you.
Have a good time up there in Tuolumne County this weekend. We're going to take a short break.
The Radio Detective.
I'm Jerry Pearce, the Radio Detective, back with you after the break. And what we do tonight, we talk about anything that's on your mind. If you've never called a talk show, you're going to find this a great experience to learn on. We'll walk you through it. Don't be nervous if you got something on your mind. I'm generally a very conservative guy in some of the things we talk about here, but maybe you have an opposing opinion to some of the things you've heard throughout the week, and we'll welcome you to want to hear what that's all about. We won't tear you up. We don't get down on you. The only one we shoot is we shoot Pete down there in Kingsburg once in a while, don't we? And Pete from Atascadero's tried to call in here 3 times. I see it flipping up on the screen. It keeps disappearing. So I miss old Pete from Atascadero. But for some reason, he can't get in here. Either the phone goes out or something happens. But right now, we've got Larry up in Squaw Valley, California. Larry, welcome to the show, sir.
Good evening, Jerry.
How are you?
Oh, living.
Good.
Reason I'm calling, I unfortunately could not call the other night when the commander was on,
Oh, yes.
and I was going to ask him. Now, he says that the one boat he can identify is in regards to Flight 800, one boat he can almost definitely identify was a cigarette.
What they did, there was these fishermen. Well, what the commander, let me back up.
Okay.
The commander has gathered up some retired admirals, U.S. Navy admirals, and some other commanders and some other ranking officers, and they formed this group of professionals, and all these people have aviation histories. Some of them are former carrier commanders, and you have to be a pilot to command an aircraft carrier, you know.
Yeah.
And so they got this group together. Commander Donaldson heads it up, and they've gone out interviewing and actually doing field work, just as I do as an investigator and you know, that type of thing. So they interviewed some fishermen there in this one little harbor, and the fishermen they interviewed, both on the fish dock and on some fishing boats, described just a short time before TWA went down a cigarette boat that was idling in the harbor, about 35 to 37 feet long, with a couple guys standing in it that appeared to be Near Eastern in description. And they were standing in the boat as if they're waiting for something. The boat's at idle in the middle of the harbor. And you've been around these harbors. These old fishermen know their harbor like the back of their hand. So anything like this stands right out to them. And then all of a sudden, the boat at full power goes out of that harbor, which caused a lot of wake to the fishing boats and so forth, and speeds out of the harbor at full power, running about 30 to 35 knots, he figured, from what they described. So then the boat's gone for about 20 minutes, I think he said, out onto the horizon. Fisherman's watching it. And about that time, after getting on the horizon, a flare object, according to the one fisherman, leaves the surface of the water and goes up in the air. Well, the fisherman loses sight of it for some reason, but the next thing the 2 fishermen see is this huge fireball explosion in the sky. and what would left the water about the same place they last saw on the horizon this cigarette boat. Then the cigarette boat later comes into another harbor where they had actually rented the boat. They rowed into this other harbor some distance away, did not tie the boat up, jumped out of it and ran for the parking lot and jumped into some kind of a car, which nobody's clear of what type of car it was, and left the area without picking up their deposit on the boat, without anything.
Okay, now, the reason I was calling,
Mm-hmm.
now, I believe the commander said this cigarette boat was about 3 miles off the line of the flight.
No, it was. Well, I don't remember what he said about that, except that it was when the flare came up from the area where they last spotted the cigarette boat on the horizon. I don't remember whether he said it was. Of course, he'd have no way of knowing that.
Yeah. Well, and I seem to remember him saying something about them being like 2 or 3 miles off
Yeah.
the direct line of the aircraft.
Okay.
And the reason I'm getting this, trying to get it straight in my mind is I seem to remember that the Grail, which is the SAM 7,
Mm-hmm.
and the Stinger both have an engagement envelope of about 5,000 meters.
Yes.
And with a cigarette boat, you're not going to get much else on it.
Right.
So, since the aircraft was at 13,800 feet climbing,
Mm-hmm.
and if they were in fact 2 miles off the line, the SAM 7 or the Stinger would not reach them.
Yeah, he discussed that, and I had him on the first show. This was the second follow-up show. The Stinger and what's the other missile? It's you probably have a different name for it,
SAM
but
7 is Grail, and there's the Rapiers and all kinds of other things.
but he indicates in his knowledge, and he's really a combat experienced guy with Stingers, and he said there's no problem for a shoulder-mounted Stinger to hit that aircraft at 13,000 feet. And in fact, the FBI, he says, when he came across this book, which was a command book the FBI has, left in the fishing office, the FBI agent that had it left it behind by mistake when he was out there on one of these boats. And so they got the book, and it's on the, by the way, if you have a computer, you can go and see all this on the net.
Unfortunately, I don't. Right
Okay.
now.
Well, they left this book behind, and it was an assignment book to the FBI agent, and they were looking for the materials, and you know more about it than I would, the kinds of things that fall off these Stingers when they're used.
Yeah.
And that was in this book, and this is what the agents were assigned to look for. Further in the book, it says, do not discuss this with the crew. They were on a crew. They were being crewed by some civilians out there. Do not discuss it. If you find it, you turn and you do this with it to hide it. Clearly, they were looking for a Stinger residue.
Okay. Well, I guess it was just my understanding.
Well, I mean,
misunderstanding.
no, that's a good question, though, Larry. I mean, we're going to have him. I'm going to try to have him back on. I talked to him yesterday again, and there's some new information still. And so in about a month, when they get it all to the next level, and we'll see what Congress is going to do regarding all those letters that he wrote to them, we're going to have him back on the show, and that'll be a good night for you to call in and talk to him directly.
If I can get to a phone.
Well, okay. Yeah, you're right. I mean, sometimes it's hard to.
Now, another question for you.
Yes, sir.
Are you a ham radio operator?
Am I?
Yes.
Yeah.
You are?
Uh-huh.
Hi.
KC6SGC. King Charlie 6 Sugar Golf Charlie.
Yeah. What is your opinion on the reconfiguring of the license structure?
Well, I don't like it. I mean, I don't like any of that. I like it to stay the way it was, frankly. I mean, I don't know what your read is on it, but I think that, it's, it goes back. It's kind of, I don't like anything that's new. And probably that's part of my prejudice on the whole thing. But you had the old setups, and now they're letting everybody into the business, I guess, to keep it alive.
Well, it's about have to, because we're down to about 750,000 operators.
Yeah, I know. But see, what happens then is everybody becomes a ham, and there's no more challenge to it. I mean, how long did it take you to get 13 words a minute on the code?
10 days.
Okay, so these guys, they can be up there on what is it, 2 meters, without having code, and I guess that's really not, in my opinion, what a ham radio operator is all about. I think going back to the CW, going back to voice as a general.
For the listeners, CW is Morse code.
Yeah, Morse code. I never will forget one of my greatest times doing that. I was one night in the shack, and I was sending out a CQ, and all of a sudden I picked up this very faint in the headset return to my CQ, and so I worked the guy, and he was at, what did he say? I ran up the Latin Long. He gave me his Latin Long. I think he was about 200 miles from the North Pole, all by himself on an expedition. And he said, I'm the first person he'd been able to reach in over 35 days. And he was happier than hell to have me coming back to him, even if it was a bunch of dits and dots, you know. So we had a good time on that. And I also I've talked to some missionaries in the jungle in Borneo. I've talked to some missionaries in South America when they had all that disease down there. Out on some of those expeditions, I was able to hook up a guy with his mother and father, one of the missionaries' mother and father up in Merced. Through the system, so we have a good time. I don't do it as much nowadays. I'm very busy, but it's a great hobby.
Okay, well, you have yourself a good night now.
Okay, Larry, I appreciate the call from Squaw Valley, California. If you want to join the show tonight, give us a call here. It's open lines on the Radio Detective Show, Squad Room Night. Give us a call at 252-1075 or toll free 877-575-1075. 4 more LAPD cops have been relieved of duty, and that makes 20 of them down in Los Angeles. These that have been kicked off the job because of the Rampart Division scandals. And the prosecutors in L.A. expect even more convictions because of this misconduct to be overturned. And these latest 4 were relieved of duty last week, and it's just a mess down there. I mean, it's... some of these guys have resigned. Some have been kicked off. 11 criminal convictions have been overturned. 4 inmates in prison been released from prison as a result of the scandal. It said the officers have framed people for crimes they didn't commit. They lied in court to obtain convictions. In some cases, shot innocent people. They said more than 40 convictions may be overturned as they continue to investigate this whole mess in Los Angeles. There's this guy, Rafael Perez. He was the officer that got this whole thing started. He broke the scandal. He was named in a lawsuit filed this week by a woman who said that Perez and his former partner beat her, stole her rent money, and stole her savings. Now, the guy's, Perez's former partner, by the way, is a guy named Nino Durden, and there's $10 million they're seeking in damages. Perez is a former anti-gang officer. He pled guilty to stealing 8 pounds of cocaine. And as a part of the deal, he expected to shave some time off his prison sentence. He started giving detectives information about all these other cases and putting the information out on the other Rampart officers who framed and shot people. And I got to tell you that for a show that is pro-police, that's a hard thing to swallow, particularly LAPD. I love LAPD until it got all messed up here. And a lot of my friends on LAPD are hanging the paper up. You know, they're looking at recruiting right now. They're trying to recruit 800 officers at LAPD. Their 250 have walked off the job last week, have turned in their papers, and either retired or transferred out. And they just can't find anybody right now at LAPD. They've got a great big recruiting drive. So maybe if you think you can go down there and be a policeman, it's a great department to work for. There's some of the finest policemen in the world have worked at LAPD. Maybe you can go down there and change some things, make it better, get it back like it used to be. I don't like their new chief. I don't like his policies. Neither do the men on the department. That's why the old-timers are leaving. And I know that from inside sources, trust me. So their morale is in the toilet. They got this stuff going on over at Rampart Division, which is right downtown L.A. It's just a mess at LAPD. But if you're a young person and you want to get into police work, boy, they got police work at L.A. Jason, you got something?
Yeah, Ed called a little while ago.
Yeah.
And that fellow was talking about the California Rifle and Pistol Association.
Right.
Well, we have a cool deal going on. If you go over to McCormick's Guns, where's that?
John McCormick's Guns is on Blackstone, just south of Shields. And it's right there at Princeton Avenue on Blackstone. John McCormick's Guns.
And they've got a manual over there, Know Your California Gun Rights. They're all out right now. We're awaiting a shipment. But the the neat thing about it is if you pick that manual up over at John McCormick's Guns, you can get their magazine 3-month subscription for nothing.
Oh, good.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So anybody out there who... We're going to announce it as soon as those
It's a rifle and
come in.
pistol group he was talking about.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, go over to John McCormick's, and that's a good way to do it. You can get the information there to join. We've got some callers holding here to talk to the detective and to each other, and we're going to get back to them. we got to take a break. Jason is throwing stuff at me, and I'm Jerry Pearce, the radio detective. It's Squad Room Night here. It's Friday, and I love it. Be right back.
intrigue, espionage, and an occasional song by Johnny Cash. The Radio Detective.
I'm Jerry Pearce, the Radio Detective. I just want to say on that last comment I made about Rampart Division in LAPD, I want you to remember something. We'll go to the callers, but I want you to remember the following. There's approximately 695,000 sworn law enforcement officers now serving in the United States, and about 10% of them are female. Each year, there are approximately 33 million plus crimes committed in the United States. They average one crime every 2 seconds. Crime fighting has taken its toll. Since the first recorded police death in 1794, there have been more than 14,000 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. A total of 1,659 law enforcement officers died in the line of duty in the last 10 years. That's an average of one death every 52 hours, or an average of 166 per year. An average of more than 65,000 law enforcement officers are assaulted each year, and some 23,000 are injured annually. The deadliest year in law enforcement history was 1974. That's when I was still in the business, when 268 officers were killed. The deadliest decade was the 1970s, when a total of 2,182 officers died. That was average of 218 each year. That figure has dropped dramatically in the 90s. The deadliest day in law enforcement history was November 24, 1917, when 9 Milwaukee police officers were killed in a bomb blast at headquarters, and a 10th officer from Columbus, Ohio Police Department was shot and killed, all in one deal. New York City has lost most officers in the line of duty than any other department, with 526 deaths. California has lost 1,176 officers, more than any other state. The state with the fewest deaths is Vermont, with a loss of 15 officers. There are over 805 federal officers on the memorial in this country for police officers, 232 correctional officers, and 18 military law enforcement officers. There are 102 female officers listed on the memorial, only 7 of whom were killed prior to 1970. More officers have been killed in January, 1,318, and December, 1,309, than during any other months of the year. During the last 10 years, more officers were killed on Fridays than any other day of the week. That's today. The fewest number of fatalities occurred on Sundays. More officers were killed between 8 and 10 p.m. than during any other 2-hour period over the past decade. That's a little bit of background for you on what kind of a job these guys and gals are into. It's serious business. This hour of the show is brought to you by the National Rifle Association. We're proud to have them as a sponsor of the NRA. They're the last thing between gun prohibition, registration, and confiscation. And last night was our NRA night with all the discussion regarding guns and gun rights. Tonight's open lines. It's squad room night here on the Radio Detective Show. Let's go to Richard in Fresno. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jerry. How are you tonight?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good. Say, with this being squad room night and everything, and the story you had earlier you were talking about, I was inspired to call you and give you a confession.
Oh, okay. All right. You took the library books, didn't you?
Right.
All right. I'm going to call Al. Al was on. He was the first one tonight. Now, Al's going to come get you.
Uh-oh.
Now, either you can surrender. You got the gun ready, as a matter of fact. You don't have it tonight. Well, I'll tell you, Richard, well, what do you think of that story? You think it, I mean, you got a gal that has 6 library books that haven't been returned, and they go through the courts with it, and they go through all this business about getting complaints and warrants, and then they has to go through the law enforcement procedure. It gets assigned to the detective division, and they send out 2 detectives to this lady's house. She's pregnant, 27-year-old gal, has 2 young children, 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they let her put the children in school on the bus to go to school, excuse me, and then they take her down and book her over library books. I mean, there's something. Why couldn't they have sent a librarian out there to, first she also says that she'd moved twice. She forgot about them. She didn't get the notices to return it. She didn't get the notice from the court. Well, and the next thing she knows, she's in the can over some library books.
Well, I'll tell you why they didn't send a librarian out there.
Why?
Because she didn't know police procedure, and she might do something wrong, and they'd throw the book at her.
Well, yeah, that's probably right. But you stole some books, did you, Richard? Or you
No, I didn't steal any books.
Confess, Richard.
Okay. Back in 1979, I was traveling through the state of Oregon, and I stopped in and visited my cousin who was living in a commune.
Okay.
And
You had a cousin living in a commune? A commune?
Yeah.
You were a hippie?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, God. All right, keep going with the story, Richard.
Okay. So I was into herbs at that time.
I bet you were.
Yeah. And
little kind of an olive green colored herb that you.
well, yeah, the
Yeah.
commune was named after a certain kind of a green
Yeah, I
herb.
bet it was.
And so she gave me this library book,
Yeah.
and it was overdue.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about herbs.
It's still overdue, isn't it, Richard?
Yeah, it's going on 22 years overdue now.
Okay, now, Richard, what I want you to do, stand up, and I
Uh-oh.
want you to face the wall, okay, Richard?
Uh-oh.
This is the penalty for what you've done to this country.
I'll tell you what I got in front of this wall here.
Okay, you ready?
Let me tell you what I've got in front of this wall here.
What's in front of it?
There's a bunch of targets with bullet holes in
Well,
them.
now, guess what's going to happen, Richard?
Uh-oh.
So I'm sorry, but... Okay, Richard's gone. We did him in for taking that library book. 22 years. Can you imagine? It's a felony of the highest regard. I mean, that's terrible to do that. Richard, you should be ashamed of yourself. Let's go to Emily in Visalia, California. Emily, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, Emily. Can you turn your radio down, hon?
Yes, you just shot that guy.
Yeah, we sure did.
You're reckless tonight.
Yeah, well, I got a gunman over here named Jason.
You play golf and
Yeah, I know.
and you teach flying.
Yeah, we do it all here at the Radio Detective. That's right.
Well, I'm going to get to serious stuff here.
Okay, that's good. We want to be serious tonight.
Yeah.
We should be for a while anyway.
Well, yes, for this. Well, I have read this in a couple of magazines about the anthrax,
Oh, yes.
and I have a nephew
Mm-hmm.
that is in the Marines, and he's in the Air Force.
Yes.
And so I have sent word to him not to take that anthrax because I've read quite a bit about it, and the pilots and everybody are leaving because they don't want to have to have the after effects of this.
Right.
And so he already knew about it because they have a computer there.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard, now this might be true, it might not, but the Pentagon is sponsoring this serum.
Mm-hmm.
And they get so much out of each shot that they give these soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they pass the word around, and they know that the others are ill, and so so the Pentagon is getting worried about this now. And
Well,
General Crow gets a share of it,
Mm-hmm.
according to what I read and heard,
Mm-hmm.
and the Pentagon, and that's why they're pushing this stuff.
Well, you know what I heard, Emily, and by the way, I'm currently looking into it. I didn't hear anything about the Pentagon having ownership over it, but I did hear about some other people whose name you would know in a heartbeat as owning the company that produces the inoculation material they're giving them. And if that proves to be true, and I got that from a good source, a Texas Ranger, who is also interested in it, but I'm not going to air it unless it's absolutely fact. If we can pull up the paperwork that these people are the owners in some way, or in some way shareholders in that company, I'm going to air it because it's going to shock some people on this business about the anthrax shots.
Well,
And not only that, about the shots that were given these troops before they went to the Gulf,
yes.
before the anthrax deal even came about. And if this is true, and I'm told it's true, but I won't air anything on here on some kind of a whim. I just won't do it. I'm going to have a fax in my hand, and we'll talk about it.
You don't want to play your hand.
Huh?
You don't want to open your hand.
Well, I'm not going to talk about it unless it's true. It wouldn't be fair to the person. But if it is true, and these people that I've been told own that company, then the public needs to know about it. And we're investigating. The radio detective's investigating that right now.
Let
But
me tell you, this is the worst thing I ever heard of. Put those men in there and then give them a shot to kill them.
well, I had Dr. Horowitz, and we should get him, Jason. Would you line that up? Yes. We have Dr. Horowitz, who wrote a book called Emerging Viruses. And that book I have Dr. Marvin Matlock here in Fresno. He's one of the leading internists in the area. He read his book.
Did you ever get that book I sent you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I did. I appreciate that. But Dr. Matlock read Dr. Horowitz's book about these viruses he discusses.
Yeah.
And he says right in there that that's not proven science. It's bad science regarding some of this anthrax inoculation that's going on. And so these soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen that are being forced to do this against their will are over a barrel.
Oh, Lord.
I mean, they're over a barrel. They're going to get in trouble if they stay in. They have the option to get out. Maybe that's one of the reasons there are so many of them getting out of the service. We can't keep people in the service under this administration. The service is down. It may be the inoculations. It may be the idiot that's the commander-in-chief. But there's some reason we're losing these people left and right in our service, and it may be these kinds of policies. And so, I mean, there's a big question mark about the anthrax. And what Dr. Matlock told me was they can be inoculated for one type of anthrax, but it doesn't cover all the types that they can be using out there.
Isn't that a horse disease?
What?
Anthrax? Don't horses die from
Oh
anthrax?
yeah, sure. It's been known to hit in those people. Yeah, I mean in the horses. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. What's
Yes,
your
sir.
mailing address? Is it the same one as before?
Yeah, same one.
Okay, I'm going to send you some other stuff.
All right. Well, I look forward to it, Emily.
Okay.
Hey, I appreciate the call from down. You have a nice weekend, Emily. That's Emily checking in from Visalia. If you want to be a part of tonight's show, 252-1075. And toll free from the West Coast, 877-575-1075. If you're tooling around, nice spring night here, isn't it, in the middle of January? You have a cell phone out there. It's an AT&T cellular. All you got to do is hit pound 1075. If you're on a GTE cellular, all you do is hit star 1075. A minute ago, we were talking about the officers killed in the line of duty in the law enforcement facts I was giving you. And I just think I ought to say this again about John Anderson's book. It's called The Newhall Incident, subtitled America's Worst Uniform Cop Massacre. This is a book that Chief Anderson, he's now the sheriff of Madera County, wrote, and it's one of the most fascinating books I've read regarding law enforcement. And he put together the Castaic shooting, or Newhall actually shooting near Castaic, that occurred where these CHP officers were murdered. And it'll show you, and if you're in law enforcement and haven't seen this book, a lot of law enforcement guys have, but if you haven't seen it, you need to go get it. You should have that in your library, The Newhall Incident by Chief John Anderson. And he starts out for you coppers, 2337 hours dispatch, Unit 7-8, Newhall CHP, mobile unit, Newhall 788. We're on a 5-mile grade, go ahead. Dispatch 78. We reported brandishing of a weapon 15 minutes ago, a red 64 Pontiac, California license, Ocean Sam Yellow 805. That's Ocean Sam Yellow 805, south behind on Highway 99 from Gorman area. Driver threatened another driver with a revolver. The mobile unit, Newhall 788-104. We copied, we'll watch for it. And that's how the whole thing starts. And that takes you right into the story. So if you're a police officer or a deputy sheriff or a law enforcement officer, or if you're not, and you're interested in the lives and deaths of some of the, and by the way, CHP officers, California Highway Patrol officers, are supposed to be the best at traffic stops in the world. There's nobody better than these guys. They're trained like no other CHP and no other Highway Patrol is trained. And for this to happen in a matter of 2 minutes, to have this many officers murdered, simply doing a traffic stop, is absolutely phenomenal. And when it comes to trying to see what happened here, it threw everybody off when this happened to these guys. And it just, it just really makes you stop. I was on duty, in fact, the night we heard about this shooting going down, April the 5th, 1970, and around midnight. So this is a book you want to go out and get. It's called The Newhall Incident, America's Worst Uniform Cop Massacre by Chief John Anderson. He was chief of the Highway Patrol at the time, and he's now sheriff of Madera County. Going back to this corruption deal in LAPD, when good, solid, honest police officers, when they hear about one of their own engaged in this type of stuff, there's big questions about why they're not more upset. And you got to ask yourself the question, and it's been said that they're protecting each other. Well, if you think that's true, I want to hear from you tonight. If you think cops in these departments protect other bad cops, let's get it on the table. But if you think that other cops catch the bad cops. Let's talk about that as well. And I'm telling you, the vast majority, and it's a good thing, of police officers in our communities are hardworking, honest, and they're doing the best job they possibly can for us. And there are some on there that get very upset when there's a minority number of officers involved in this wrongdoing that we keep hearing about on the news. And it makes police work absolutely tremendously more difficult. And it's unfortunately, as long as the police departments have got to draw their applicants from the human race, there's some likelihood that they're going to get some undesired people. And they're going to have problems like that, and particularly some of these hiring policies they have now in some of these larger departments. They do everything they can to eliminate these undesirable people from getting in there, but sooner or later some are going to get into the department, and you're going to have to deal with it when these things happen. And when they say police officers resist temptations on the job, you know, that it's important that they try to resist temptations, and that's a very difficult task, some would say, of the police officer. Well, I don't believe that. What is this business about it being difficult to resist temptation? I don't even understand that thinking. That's police psychologists thinking. That's what that is. It's not difficult. You just don't deal with it. You don't get tempted. You're a police officer, for crying out loud. You're sworn to uphold the law. There shouldn't be any temptation in the issue at all. In fact, if somebody comes at you with some kind of offer or some kind of deal, you bust them for bribery. There's no question, and there should be no question in your mind about being a crooked cop. That shouldn't even enter your mind. So when you hear this stuff about it's really hard because there's all these tempting things going on, forget it. We got to leave and take this break. We're back with Greg, just called in here, but he's on his cell phone, and I've got to go to the top of the hour. We'll be back here in about 5 minutes, Greg. If you can hang in there, I'll put you right on. I'm Jerry Pearce, the radio detective, and this is Squad Room Night right here. See you in a moment.
The Radio Detective, brought to you by the California Correctional Peace Officers Association. They walk the toughest beat in the state.